So a microplastic is just literally a small piece of plastic, less than 5 millimeters. But what that means is what's something that's 5 millimeters? I mean, it's about the size of the tip of your eraser and smaller. The majority of what we started to see when we started working in this field were pieces that you could see with your eye, but you saw a lot better under a microscope. What we're learning now is that the majority of what's out there is smaller than you can see with your eye and things that you need a microscope to see. And so as we start to get better at techniques, we start to look smaller and smaller and see that this tiny little material seems to be everywhere.
The risk for microplastics for the pollutants is greater because a turtle isn't going to eat a water bottle. That's why microplastics are nefarious, because they're so tiny that they either accidentally are consumed or they're mistaken for food. So baby fish and baby birds eat lots of plastics, to the point where if you go into the Pacific, this is anecdotal, but I've heard that it's hard to find orange and red pieces because they think it's krill.
What we are doing is more trying to understand how it gets into the environment, where it goes when it gets there, and how it impacts ecosystems from an animal viewpoint. How does it impact the biodiversity? Does it impact organisms in terms of toxicity? Does it make it difficult for them to reproduce and reduce their populations? This all goes under the 3 pillars of food security. One of the pillars is, does it deplete our fish stocks? Do we not have enough food because of microplastic? That's an ecological question. Then there's does it change the nutritional value of our food because our animals are eating more plastic and not eating food, so they might have less vitamins and nutrients than we need. And then third is food safety. Are there chemicals that go from the plastic into our body that cause harm? And those are questions that all are worthy of investigation.
So part of that problem of why there's no clear consensus is that there is no standardized microplastic particles. People make them, and it varies from something very high-tech to purchasing powders, like polyethylene powders from a manufacturer, to somebody literally grading labware. And so you have all of these variations and all of these different processes to make these particles create different shapes, different sizes, which means that they have different surface areas. And you can understand surface area by say, like, here's the space on this table. And let's say in this space there's 10 spots for a pollutant to absorb. Well, if I'm a plastic with more surface area, I have, let's say, twice as much. Now there's 20 spots. And so that's why surface area is important, because there's literally more surface, there's more sites for the pollutant to absorb.
All plastics are produced with a diversity of chemicals. They end up in the environment and they act kind of like a sponge for the other chemicals out there. Those will also accumulate on the plastic. And so when I take a piece of plastic out of the environment, in addition to it being a physical particle, there's kind of a chemical cocktail on there, some of which is associated with manufacturing, some of which just came on because it was already in the environment already and it accumulated on the plastic.
The pollutants are hydrophobic, like oil. They don't want to be in the water, and plastics are also hydrophobic, and so they're like a sponge. And so when the pollutants encounter plastics, they absorb into them. And that's the vector part of it. It's now wherever the microplastics go, those pharmaceutical and personal care products go. The plastics are now taking these pollutants that normally wouldn't be in high concentrations in the water. Now they're in high concentrations in these little particles, and so when they're released from the wastewater plant in the clean effluent and they make it, let's say, into the Potomac River, they might make it into the Chesapeake Bay where it settles and maybe it's eaten by an oyster. Or maybe it goes really far and ends up in a pretty pristine area of the ocean where there normally wouldn't be these contaminants.
So right now, and this is kind of the nature of the trend in scientific fields, right, is first you figure out, is it there? So while there's a ton of work quantifying microplastic in the environment, there's still very little quantifying it for human exposure, right? In drinking water, in seafood, in the dust, in house dust. So those are all kind of new fields that I know people are getting into, including at this university, which is great. And then that next step is, does it matter and why?
I'm not even at the field really isn't even at the point where we can do a risk assessment and assess the danger. Right now we're trying to create methods to be able to measure them and to test them to be able to get at that. So my work, what a lot of my project has been focused on, has been making standardized microplastic particles. So there are a lot of papers out there that have done toxicological tests. So they feed microplastics with organic pollutants to various organisms. And the consensus has been, it depends.
So a World Health Organization report came out last week that actually had headlines that said we don't need to worry about microplastics in our drinking water. It's not that we have evidence of no harm, it's that we have no evidence, period, because the researchers have yet to come on scene to really test hypotheses about how it impacts humans. Right? I'm an ecologist. I came into this field to understand how it impacts fish and other wildlife. And that's the majority of the people that are currently working in the field of microplastics. So it's not that it doesn't harm humans, it's that we don't know. And we need people to come into the field with the medical backgrounds who can do it in a proper and rigorous way. In the lab, we are trying to figure out the number of particles in a sample, the size of particles in a sample, and the type of particles in a sample. And the Raman gets us at the type. I have 20 undergraduate students in my lab picking and counting microplastics under a microscope, which then they put them on a plate that then goes to the Raman to take a laser to a subsample of them and tell you whether each particle is plastic and what type it is. And then there are so many different types of polymers out there that it's a lot of work.